Yes, India has one of the youngest demographic or population in the world, but the number of our senior citizens is also rising with greater life expectancy and better medical care. Now, how have these seniors managed to ride out the pandemic, especially those who are living alone away from their families? Today on The Property Show, we bring you an interesting discussion on senior living and what are the factors to keep in mind when deciding to buy or rent a home in a retirement community, either for yourself or the elders in your family. Joining me on the show, Shrikant Paranjape, Chairman Paranjape Schemes Construction Limited. Also with us, Mohit Nirula, CEO of Columbia Pacific Communities, and Subhankar Mitra, MD of Advisory Services India, Colliers. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I think we're going to have a very important discussion today and a very relevant one. Shrikant, I'm going to come to you first. Atashri by Paranjape Schemes was probably the first entrant in senior living projects in India. I mean, that was some time ago, a decade ago. How much do you think has demand accelerated in the pandemic?
Manisha, it's actually 2 decades ago.
2 decades ago.
So
okay.
we started the first construction in 1998, completed in 2001. And since 2001, it's exactly 20 years now since the first facility. We started housekeeping. And mind you, in senior housing, real estate is part A, real estate, but the major part is the post-real estate situation, you know, the maintenance and service of that. So
Understood.
we have come a long way actually. And in 20 years, definitely it has become a most accepted way of spending your retirement life. From a situation where they just did not want to come to a retirement house, to that they definitely want to come to retirement house.
Mohit, I mean, you are actually heading India's largest senior living community and company. What has actually changed in the pandemic in the way that you manage these senior citizen communities and properties? And how do you keep the most vulnerable group safe?
So Manisha, thank you for that question and for saying that Columbia Pacific Communities is the country's largest. We are humbled that we have that confidence of our residents. But rather than say what has changed in the last 18-20 months, I would actually say that it has reinforced to us some of the home truths that really make communities designed for seniors a much better option than staying alone or staying in what I call mixed family condominium setups. And really where that comes from is a senior living community is homogeneous in its expectations of service. Unlike a mixed family condominium setup where, you know, the needs of its residents, because the residents are mixed, the needs are different. We are able to, or we were over the last 18 months, were able to ring fence our communities from the external influence. We are blessed with a very good set of frontline team members, and them staying on property then allowed us to ensure that the external environment where the virus was rampant was kept outside the doors. Now, whilst we kept that outside the doors, we were also able to, because of our philosophy of positive aging, able to ensure that physical distancing did not result in social isolation. So within our communities, we were able to ensure that people remained socially engaged, whether it was on the digital platform or in the open spaces where physical distances did not result in loneliness, which was a problem that all of us know was a problem. And really, Manisha, the problem of the pandemic will come to be known in time as to the impact it's had on mental health as well.
Right.
There are two other things that I'll mention that helped us a lot. In the first wave, we were able to, because of our partners, Manipal Hospitals, previously Columbia Asia Hospitals, now Manipal Hospitals, we were able to ensure that the wave of disinformation that spread across WhatsApp and other mediums, we were able to counter that with solid medical advice on how to approach this. And the second thing that helped us with the second wave was that between the first wave and the second wave, we were able to ensure that all our residents, with the support of all the governments in the states that we were present were able to get their 2 doses of vaccine.
So, Subhankar, there's a lot of difference. I know that we use these words very interchangeably: retirement communities, senior citizen living, assisted living. But there are differences which are nuanced in these three, isn't it? In fact, assisted living is probably very different from senior citizen living or senior living, as we say.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, people use this term very interchangeably, which is not the right thing. Today a lot of people are taking early retirement. I mean, from their professional life, and but they may be very well in terms of their health parameters, in terms of their physical fitness, etc. So people in mid-50s also can take retirement today and choose to stay in a community of like-minded people where they don't need any extra attention as such. So that's the retirement home, and we are seeing there is a lot of such retirement home or second home or gated communities which are coming up across the country. But the problem starts coming in when people are in the late 60s or early 70s, where people might develop certain medical conditions and that may require medical attention on and off, not on a regular basis. That's where the stage where the assisted living comes in. And the third stage is the critical care, where somebody is at a 80s or late 70s or have a very serious ailment of heart problem, kidney problem, or somebody who needs a 24/7 monitoring, etc., which is a critical care unit. I mean, people may not require hospitalization, but all the vital parameter needs to be checked on a regular basis. So it's a whole range of services that are associated with the age, starting from say mid-50s to 70s, 80s, and the life expectancy.
So, Subhankar, where is the biggest gap in India? Is it in assisted living, or do you believe that the entire sector now needs to bump up the supply?
So there are supplies. Where we see a realistic solution to this problem is like a gated communities and second home, which is coming, which is been positioned as a retirement home. There is a plenty of supply because you don't need that much of service aspect to it. The problem starts with the assisted living and the critical care living in that particular segment, where it is not just a real estate, it is a whole lot of services which are associated with it. So unless those are provided, it becomes it doesn't fulfill the parameters that were called for.
All right, Shrikant, is that the reason why we still don't see many developers, like you rightly said upfront, that it's not a development business. There is a huge aspect of maintenance and taking care of the business. I mean, companies like Tata's have tried to get into it, but they've actually passed on the maintenance to a third party and are not pursuing this segment very strongly.
Developers by nature are gypsies, they are on one side for 4 years and they move on. This business is, of course, you do the development for those 4 years, but you stay back and continue. So I think there are very few developers who have that psyche.
Well, I'm going to look at the Colliers Research to see where is the demand and how much is it. Now, the demand for organized senior living facilities in 2021 is going to be a little over 88,000 units. And if you look at what's available, it's only 20,000 units as per 2020. Now, this demand is expected to increase to 1.25 lakh units in 2031, which means there's a considerable demand-supply gap of over 60,000 units. Mohit, there's a huge market out there, isn't it? I mean, if you look at, compare what is available in India vis-a-vis in Australia or a US, we're still a very tiny market for senior living, isn't it?
Well, I can tell you what our promoter, Dan Beatty from Columbia Pacific Management, said to me when we started 3 years ago. And I must clarify that Dan Beatty is the world's leading expert on senior living. He built and created 3 separate companies of hundreds of communities in the US in his time. And he said that India will run out of brick and mortar, it will not run out of demand. Manisha, we add 4 million seniors every year, right? Globalization has ensured that the middle class India, their children have had access to the best education. They can work anywhere in the country. In many cases, they're working all over the world. And therefore, parents and children are already, although culturally we are very close to each other, but circumstances have resulted in parents and seniors living separately. And if parents are to live separately, then communities such as the ones that we design and build must be the preferred option, not the when there is no option kind of place. It is the preferred option. Also, Manisha, what is happening is that the 55 and above demographic has the means, they have the time, and they have the desire to live life to the fullest. So if you're telling me that the gap currently is 10x, I can tell you the moment another 5 years, the gap will be 20x or 30x, because the gestation period of a project is 3 to 4 years. But every year we are adding 4 million seniors, many of whom don't have their children living with them.
Absolutely.
Purely because the world's their oyster.
In fact,
So,
Mohit,
to
this
me,
time in the
opportunity is
pandemic,
huge.
I get that. So in the pandemic, in fact, I think every NRI friend of mine has really suffered emotionally, unable to reach out to their parents, worried about their parents. So A, the stigma has gone, and B, I think the pandemic has just thrown up a very important need for this, for more senior living projects to come through. Subhankar, my last question before I wrap out, it's not considered as an investment asset in the sense that there's not been much appreciation in such projects. So do you just buy, do you rent, what do you do?
See, in India, it is still a very evolving stage. I mean, the way we are looking at things, most of the time the developer would try to push the real estate part of it, and then they will charge a monthly or an annual maintenance fee, and all the service charges are all extra. That is not the ideal model in all the cases. If we look at West, there are various models available like reverse mortgage. The insurance cover is good. So I think we are still in search of right model, which is kind of a, which can cater to a large segment of population, because India has a wide demography in terms of affordability, in terms of economic well-being, etc. So once we click a right model, which is not entirely front-loaded and very capital intensive, and if it becomes like a more service oriented and more like an OPEX driven, backed by insurance, backed by other incomes, then we create a kind of a sustainable business model, and then we'll be able to see these scaling up. It is not a real estate play in the first place.
It's more absolutely a management play, and I think there's a big gap in the affordable category of senior living because maintenance costs are very high, but that's for another day. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today on this important discussion. We'll come back to this at another time, maybe 6 months down the line. Now, I mean, I'm just going to wrap out with the numbers and why this is such an important segment to talk about. There are 5 million senior citizens living alone as of 2021, and this number is expected to rise to 8 million by 2031. So Mohit Nirula said this is a market which is waiting to happen, but it's not that much a real estate play, but it's actually a management play. So only players who can handle the management of a healthy, safe space for senior citizens really should be in it.